back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys, so I'm here today to review a book which I would call a semi-finalist from the SPFBO in my batch. This book was one I really enjoyed reading and I would highly recommend to you guys. So let's find out a bit more about it. The book I'm going to be talking about is called Seraphina's Lament and it's by Sarah Chorn. And I'm going to put a picture up. Holding up the iPad does not really work. So this story is definitely quite a dark one. I have to say that from the very start, because from the beginning of the book it's pretty dark. In fact, I believe we start the book with a cannibalism scene, so if you do not like grimdark or something along those lines, probably don't pick this one up. However, if you do like that or you're happy to read that sort of thing, then keep watching and maybe go and read this one. This book I would describe as grimdark, horror, but also incredibly beautiful. And what I mean by that is the writing, the prose is one of the most beautiful stories that I have ever read, even though it is horror, which is weird. But it works so incredibly well. The author has done an incredible job of describing things in a way that is very emotional and very evocative, despite the fact that these things are quite often horrific, nasty, terrible things that are going on to the characters. Now, this world is an expansive one. It's ruled over by a kind of lord who is called Iad, and he is kind of trying to change the way things work. He didn't want a monarchy, so he overthrew the monarchy, and he did that with one of his best friends and later husband. But his husband was dismayed by him, kind of the way he brutally took over, and now his husband is a rebel. His husband was called Vaden. We follow all of these different characters across the world, and the main character who we start the story with is Taub. Taub is a young man. He is kind of just an average guy, I suppose, who is farming, and he has a community of people around him, but there is a famine of kinds which hits this area, and this famine is so extreme that not only does he have to kind of eat everything that is on his land, he ends up devouring not only that, but himself and more. He is quite desperate, and it really does focus in on a horrible time in this world. So it's a very interesting concept to see such desperation and such horror, but there is a reason for it, and the reason is because there's nothing else that this character can do. There is no other hope besides survival to continue their existence, and Taub is not the only one who goes through a change as dramatic as he does. He ends up with followers and people who follow the same horrible path that he does, because everyone is as desperate as each other. And this is definitely reminiscent of like the Holodomor, which happened in Ukraine. I saw a couple of other people's reviews where they mentioned this was inspired by that Holodomor, and I had never heard of it before, so I had to go and Google what it was, and it was a really horrific time in the history of Ukraine, I believe, where the Soviets were kind of rationing the food and not distributing it properly, and people were dying from a self-inflicted genocide almost. And this world is very much a similar setup where the people who have power, the people in charge like Iad, they have resources, they have food, they have everything they need to survive, and they are trying their best to extort more and more from the people who live in surrounding towns and villages. They're taking taxes, they're taking meat, bread, cheese, everything from these people, right down to the very last crumb of everything they have on their land. If they don't have things that they can take, they then take their animals who are producing their food, they take crops that they need for themselves. It doesn't matter what they have left, they will take it if they can't provide it to them. So it's a very, very brutal world where everything is starting to die off and everything is being essentially pillaged by the nobility, and we see all of these poor people who are struggling to survive and turn to an extreme level of survival. Taub is their leader. So the other characters I mentioned were Seraphina and Nerian. They each have an element that they can control. So Seraphina is able to control fire and Nerian is able to control water. They were twins born and raised kind of by Iad. They were bought by him when they were younger, but he is a brutal master. He's not someone you want to displease because he is quite horrible in his punishments, and Seraphina helped Nerian to escape when they were younger, and she has ever since borne the brunt of helping him to escape because she was disfigured and really injured badly by Iyad for helping Nerian to escape. Now, she is a slave, essentially, to Iyad. He keeps her on a leash and she is not able to do anything without him knowing because Iyad actually has a mind-reading ability, which is pretty awful when he is the leader of the country. I mean, it's good for him, but not so good for everyone else. So it's pretty nasty for her. Her life is very miserable, and the only thing that really gives her solace is hoping that her brother is out there somewhere escaping and staying alive and surviving and fighting back against this horrible guy who's in charge. And we follow Nerian as he is out in the world doing this, and he actually has met up with Iyad's ex, which is Vaden, and they are both kind of rebels together. They've got a group of people who are rebellious with them. They're trying to help the common people overthrow and take back what is theirs and basically get Iyad out of power. The powers that Seraphina and Nerian have are both very powerful. They're quite a high level of power for elemental control. They don't usually see many elemental powerful people being born in generations, and to have two at once is quite an incredible time. The other character who's quite an interesting one is Mouse. Mouse is like an adopted daughter of Nerian. She is someone who doesn't feature a huge amount in the story, but someone who I think is quite important overall in the ending. She really comes into her own as the story goes on because she starts to have these feelings, these pangs of hunger, and it's not quite the same as Taub, where he's had to devour everything and kind of grow a leadership position. It's very much a need to help people, but in order to do that she has to do something horrible and she has to devour their souls, and it's quite a nasty power that she has and one that she can't control much, but her characterization I think was very interesting to follow as well. The other characters that we're following alongside these main ones is the Ascended. These are kind of godlike beings who live in barrows and have lived for many generations of life. They kind of reawaken every so often to help or heal the world, and we don't know much about them. In fact, we know very little about them until the very ending, but I think they're very manipulative and very cunning and conniving. They're kind of trying to push all these people on the world together to bring about something quite incredible. So whether that happens or not is the point of the story, I suppose, and you find out a little bit more about them every now and then with an interlude. So those are the main characters, and that's the main plot. It's all about this world and the death of this world and whether or not our characters can save it if they come together. But in order to save it, they have to make terrible choices and terrible sacrifices. So it's quite a horrible story as well, and it's not something I would typically pick up. In fact, it's something I would probably steer clear of if I'd just read the blurb in a bookshop or something like that. But I found myself completely hooked into this story and very amazed by how much I enjoyed it and how much I wanted to find out what was going to happen next. I will say the ending of this book felt a little bit too chaotic for me. It was a lot going on at once. I think going forward things would kind of even out again because this is just the first book in the series and I think there's a lot more to come. So the ending was the only bit I had a slight quibble with, not because it was too quick, just because there was so much happening at the same time and I was trying to wrap my head around how it would all be going on and how it would all be going down, and it was a lot of magic and power and just crazy destruction. So very cool ending, but very chaotic, and lots more still to be answered, like a lot of questions that I'd like to know the answer to going forward, which is a good thing. So again, I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I certainly think a lot of you will enjoy it if you don't mind the horror aspects and the more brutal aspects of the book. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you do end up picking it up, and I'll put a link to it below where you can pick it up. But I genuinely really enjoyed this story, and I think it was one that a lot of people would enjoy and a lot of people would find quite fascinating and quite beautiful and harrowing all at once. So do leave me your thoughts if you do buy it, and thank you all so much for watching. I will see you very soon in another video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.